Alrighty, everyone. This is meteorologist Timmy Albertson here with you guys for tonight's weather chat with Timmy. We're going to take a look at the tropics. We still got Rina and Philippe interacting with each other. We'll also take a look at some showers and thunderstorms across parts of Minnesota. We'll kind of take a little bit of a look at the forecast for the day tomorrow. We'll see maybe if there's going to be any showers and storms for some of those football games for the day tomorrow. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look over at Tropical Storm Philippe. Hey, Philippe is actually looking a little bit better today than it did yesterday, but not by much. But, you know, if you've been following the past couple of days, Philippe has really had a hard time of things with the wind shear and the wind shear and pretty much the wind shear. Has really been kind of beating Philippe up. But now Philippe has gone back up to 50-mile-an-hour winds. Woo! What is Philippe going to be doing? Well, we talked about yesterday, we talked about the Fujiwara effect, or kind of the binary interaction between two low pressure systems. When they get kind of close, they will kind of interact with each other, and that will kind of impact their direction a little bit here. So if you look at the National Hurricane Center's track, you see it right down there. Notice how the data points for pretty much this weekend are almost right on top of each other, and they're also kind of going down to the south and to the west. Well, that is that part of that binary interaction. So Philippe being the one on the left is the one that's kind of making its way down to the south. So Philippe is not going to be moving very much over the weekend. Part of the reason for that is, again, its interaction with Rina just off towards its east. So we're probably not going to be seeing its location, obviously if it's not moving fast, its location's probably not going to change much as we go through the weekend. I guess that was kind of a silly sub point there, but you get the idea. What's going to happen after this weekend, though? Well, there's still some uncertainty with the forecast, but there is thinking that Philippe may actually intensify a little bit as we go into next week. And part of the reason for that is that it's going to be running into an area with a little bit of a less wind shear, but also it's probably going to be going over some somewhat warmer ocean temperatures there, and maybe a little bit of an increase too in some mid-level moisture. And that could very well help it to intensify a bit more, especially as we go maybe in towards Tuesday and Wednesday. Right now, it's still expected to stay as a tropical storm, but National Hurricane Center, at least right now, if their forecast kind of has it at the high end of the tropical storm category. Again, we talked about Saffir-Simpson scale and everything. It's how we rate tropical systems. So again, tropical storm, 39 to 70 3-mile-an-hour winds. And then once you get above that, it's a hurricane. And, that's how that works. And then that's divided into categories because we meteorologists love to categorize everything, which I guess I kind of do too sometimes, but there's a lot of categories for stuff in weather, you'll come to find out. All right, what about Rina? Well, as I mentioned yesterday, Rina is actually the replacement name of Rita. If you guys remember Hurricane Rita back in 2005, I certainly remember that one. That was quite an interesting one too. Rina is the replacement name for Rita. When a hurricane does something that is of note or of record of something substantial, they'll retire its name and replace it with a new one. And again, that list repeats every 6 years. So this right now, we are on the same list that was being used in 2005. And if you remember that season, that was a goodie. A lot of tropical systems with that. Katrina, Wilma, obviously Rita. There was another big one too. Anyways, but there was a lot. That was a very active hurricane season. Actually, it was the record center until man, that fly. Boy, I thought I got them all. Anyways, I guess we got a guess tonight. It's a fly. But anyways, this is the same list that was used in 2005. Obviously, though, with some replacements, Rina being one of them. Latest edition. So, Rina, 45-mile-an-hour winds right now. Barely a tropical storm. And look at it there on the satellite imagery. It is not looking very good at all. You can see how the low-level circulation is just really exposed. In fact, the whole circulation is pretty much exposed. The wind shear has just kind of pushed that convection way off towards its east. You can see a little bit of it there trying to develop, but again, it's really having a tough time of it here. So that is Rina. What is Rina going to be doing over the weekend? Probably not much. Honestly, probably suffering just like how Philippe has suffered throughout much of the week. Probably not going to intensify much, probably not really going to be doing a whole lot other than trying to just kind of make its way along as we go through the weekend. So it may actually end up weakening, especially as we start off next work week, becoming maybe just kind of a post-tropical system and then maybe just kind of falling apart altogether. There is still some uncertainties, though, with the forecast, and part of the uncertainties, again, is, well, I mean, this system is just kind of getting beat up, so it's a little tricky right now. All right, kind of grazed over Arena there, but that's pretty much the case. Let's talk about that binary interaction, though. We talked about it yesterday, the Fujiwara effect. When you get two areas of low pressure near each other, they kind of orbit around each other. This might be a little hard to see, but this is an infrared satellite loop over the course of this afternoon. You can see that Philippe is that big blob there, kind of just to the left of the center, and Rina is that little blob just to the right of the center. You can see how Philippe is kind of moving his way down to the south, Rina moving up to the northwest. They're kind of orbiting each other around a central point that is right in between. So they're both kind of attracted to each other in a little bit of a way, as they are both areas of low pressure. But eventually they will separate, and that's what we expect to happen with Philippe. It will kind of separate itself enough from Rina as we go towards beginning of next week, as it gets kind of pushed around by a little bit of an upper level drop off towards east. So, boom, there it is. Pretty cool, huh? Binary interaction there for you, folks. You can impress your friends with that at the next party. Anyways, all right, let's take a look here, of course, at the latest weather map. And here is what we got going on right now across the United States. Big thing right now is this area of low pressure down across southwestern Minnesota, right around the Worthington area. It has this little warm front that it is trying to lift up towards the north. Cold front approaching its way in from the western part of Minnesota. Again, all kind of attached to this kind of broad frontal boundary that we've been seeing kind of draped out, courtesy of that upper level trough we took a look at a couple of days ago. So that is producing some showers and some thunderstorms across parts of Minnesota. Some of them have managed to be strong. We're looking right now west of the Minneapolis area. And this little guy in particular really seems to be doing pretty well. It's warned right now for about 1.5 inch size hail and 60-mile-an-hour winds. So not so much of a wind thing as it is maybe more so of a hail thing. And what makes this one also pretty interesting is we take a look at the radar signature here. Notice the kind of these darker reflectivities here. In meteorology, we call this type of a setup where we see this kind of backward C shape as a bow echo. And without going into too much of the physics of it, it's a little bit of a push forward of the winds of the storm, and, well, the winds helping the storm. Anyways, environmental conditions, just kind of an extra push, kind of forms that backward C, and that's a good indication if we're looking for possibly some strong winds here. So let's go ahead and we'll take a look over at the velocity radar imagery, and we'll see maybe if we can't pick up any decent wind signatures here. With that, that is cloud tops. Obviously, this thing probably has some high cloud tops, as that's what these storms do. So there we go. Take a look at that. Looks like here, if we flip onto this velocity radar imagery here, and I understand I'm blocking it here, so we'll move it over a little bit. What you see here, my part here, that is a velocity radar image, the green and the red stuff right there. That is what that is this the radar detecting the direction and the speed of winds. We use this for looking for straight line winds as well as looking for tornadoes. To your left, the image that you see there is a reflectivity. That's the rainfall that you're used to seeing. So there you go. Take a look at this little guy here. So if we were to go ahead and kind of data point some of this, it does look like right here in particular, this part right here of the storm that I'm kind of blocking, but it's this part right to the north of the Morton area, right not too far away from Redwood Falls here. This is actually kind of interesting. That radar signature there is about a 75-mile-an-hour winds. Now, mind you, folks, we're still a little far away from the radar, so we're looking a little higher up. So let's just kind of subtract about 10 miles an hour or so of wind, and that could have been a wind gust maybe about 60 to 65 miles an hour. So, again, not record-setting winds, but certainly a little bit of a push there. And, again, look at that little feature here. This is a kind of a good example of what a bow echo is. So again, this is kind of a localized, relatively speaking, depending upon the size. In this case, this is not a big storm line. It's kind of just a, localized storm there. But again, we have the winds coming in from the back that are kind of pushing the storm a little bit fast here. And long story short, that just translates to some very gusty winds. And again, we can see it right there, this backward C shape. So it is a bow echo. And again, we'll go into the physics of this some other time here. It is kind of interesting. Now, this is not a feature that is going to typically last. Well, I mean, it can last for quite a while. But generally, we see, they kind of bow out a little bit and then not bow out and maybe do it again a little bit later. So not only is there going to probably be a little bit of hail with the storm just based on some of these reflectivities that we're seeing, but there probably is at least a decent push here of some wind, certainly probably some gusty winds there. Now, again, what we're seeing with some of these radar returns here on the velocity imagery that I am kind of blocking there, but let's take a look here. We do see, again, mainly just kind of 50s and a couple of 60s here and there. I'm looking at the numbers up at the top here that you can't see. But again, we had one that was about 76, but a little higher up in the storm. So if we were to kind of, account for friction a little bit and the fact that it's also lower down where friction plays kind of a bigger role. I mean, friction plays a role kind of in most of the world, but altitude it decreases because you're further away from land. But again, you would probably subtract about 10, 15 miles an hour off that and probably get yourself a good, 60-mile-an-hour wind gust there. So the wind warning, at least in this type of a situation, 60-mile-an-hour winds, that's still pretty decent. That's certainly pretty gusty. That, could knock down a few things. Now, sometimes, well, by a few things, I mean some tree branches. Now, sometimes what we see with these Boeing situations is, again, without going into too much of the physics here, but you can kind of see at least a little bit of the notch here. Is that it's not unusual to see at least a little bit of an increase, possibly in some low-level rotation on the northern part of these Boeing segments. And again, there's some other reasons for that, but a lot of it just has to do with the way with the way the structure, the wind structure within this thunderstorm is kind of shaped out. Again, it's a little hard to explain without a diagram, which is why I'm trying to kind of keep it a little less scientific explanation right now, because if I say it, if I explain it and then don't have a diagram to really elaborate it with, you might get the wrong idea. So it does look like there was a little bit of a notch there, maybe. But again, folks, keep in mind here that even if that was a little bit of kind of a notch there, it was not very strong. But it's not unheard of to sometimes see, at least an increased low-level rotation right here, kind of on the northern portion of these little bow segments. And again, a lot of it just has to do with the way the wind is structured with these storms. So taking a look here at this little guy, certainly an interesting one, mainly just kind of I would say more or less just kind of a straight line wind with some hail within it. And just as I was about ready to ask it if they were going to extend that warning, they did. So let's see what this new thunderstorm warning is for. It's for 1-inch size hail and 60-mile-an-hour winds. So severe thunderstorms, in case you guys are wondering, to be a severe thunderstorm, you have to have either hail at or greater than 1 inch in diameter, and or you have to have 58-mile-an-hour winds or greater. So in both categories with this thunderstorm, it is pretty much right at the bottom here. And again, the way I'm looking at this at the moment here, let's flip over to the VILs here and see a little bit, if we can't, maybe see a little bit in the way of what's going on here with the liquid within the storm. Well, those are pretty decent returns here too. So I would certainly say probably about 1/2 inch to 1 inch size hail looks kind of likely. There's probably, maybe not quite 1 inch, but certainly some hail nonetheless. But also, again, as we took a look at on the velocity radar imagery, certainly the possibility for some gusty winds. And again, we can see it right there, kind of that C shape still holding out pretty well. So certainly itself kind of a strong thunderstorm, one could certainly say. All right, let's go ahead and zoom out here a little bit. That's pretty much, ironically, pretty much the strongest storm I think that is ongoing right now here in the U.S. We can see that frontal boundary stretch is kind of zigzagging more or less across the central part of the United States. There is that upper level trough back out across parts of the Pacific coast. And what's interesting about that is that trough's going to kind of hang out there as we go through the next couple of days here. So again, we're kind of looped this here. I know it's a lot of stuff you see here. It's kind of trippy. It's like a kaleidoscope. Just focus here on this center image here. We'll zoom it in a little bit. But this is an upper level, was one of the upper level charts that we look at. And you can see how as we go into the weekend, that upper level trough just hanging out across the Pacific Northwest. So that's part of the reason why we're seeing that activity the way we're seeing it. These little areas of low pressure at the surface, all right, are kind of riding along that frontal, or kind of riding along the way the upper level winds are positioned here. So this is a height map, so it's pressure heights. I know it's really weird. This will make more sense in the wintertime. We'll talk about it more in the wintertime. But you can kind of think of the direction of the wind with these little guys as being parallel to these lines. So again, southwesterly flow over here, these little kind of waves here in the upper levels happening, these little waves of low pressure at the surface just kind of cruising along there. So that's part of the reason why we're seeing some of that activity. So as we go through the weekend, some thunderstorm activity is going to be pretty well, is going to be likely, most likely across the area from parts of the Rockies going up to the northern plains. Eventually, that upper level trough will begin to make its way to the east, albeit maybe not quite as strong. But as we go into the start or to about the Monday, late Monday and into Tuesday, you can see that trough is now pushing its way over the Rockies and now into parts of the upper plains. And that is going to allow for another wave of low pressure to really develop and could set itself up to at least being somewhat of an active, albeit maybe not a severe weather outbreak, but at least an active weather across the northern plains as we go into the beginning and end or beginning and middle part of next week, without going into too much detail there. So let's go ahead here and flip over from the Weather Prediction Center here, part of the National Weather Service. This is what they got for, I believe this is going to be for Wednesday morning. So again, you can see how as that upper level trough exits out, there's the surface of low pressure that's going to be associated with that. It's going to be this little guy here. Again, that trough makes its way into the Rockies. There's a little wave of low pressure. It meets up with that upper level trough. It likes that upper level trough. So this is going to be Tuesday. Pretty decent size high pressure, by the way, over the eastern U.S. We'll come back to that too in just a moment. We'll talk about the above average temperatures that they're going to be seeing in parts of the U.S. So certainly a lot of southwesterly winds right about here. The way the air flows around the high pressure, it's clockwise. So you get the idea. Winds coming in from the north over the ocean, but coming in from the south down here. So anyways, long story short, there's that low pressure on Tuesday, and by Wednesday you can see it is intensified as it makes its way into Minnesota. So it looks like we'll be having possibly a good example maybe here, at least an early example of the life cycle of a mid-latitude low pressure system there. So we'll talk more about that. And again, this is what gives you your snow in the these are these nice strong lows that help to bring some pretty good snowstorms in the wintertime. So again, of the same family. These are also the same ones that help produce tornado outbreaks in the spring, but you get the idea. So looks like we're going to be seeing some active weather. Again, we won't go into too much detail about that. But we took a look at, let's see here if I still have it up. We took a look at the Climate Center's forecast. And again, we're looking beyond what would be the regular 7-day forecast period at this point. So we're looking about 6 to 10 days out here. So above average temperatures, as we go through the weekend. But then once we see this next system moving through, you can see those temperatures are going to be a little bit below average across the central part of the United States there. Whereas then we're going to see them going above average across the Pacific Northwest. So below average in the Pacific Northwest this weekend, above average for the central part of the U.S. And then once we get that system to push through as we go into next week, behind that, cooler temperatures across the central part of the U.S. and then above average back there. So, just the way the upper levels work here. It's not unusual. Kind of like a wave. All right. If it's warm in one place, it's probably going to be cold in another. U.S. kind of works out that way just by coincidence, the size of it. Typically, if we were to kind of go back here to our upper level chart, you can see that, if one half will see troughing, the other half will see ridging. It doesn't always work out that way, but typically when we're dealing with these kind of larger upper level setups here, that ironically is normally how that works, at least in the U.S. One half is under a trough, the other half will be under the ridge. And again, it's just kind of the way that works out. I hope that made sense. All right. So that is what is going on. Let's go ahead and check back at our storm here really quickly. Oh, yeah, so we were talking about possibility for some storms as we go into the weekend. Again, Pacific Northwest, and then we'll be watching the possibility for some storms, especially as we go towards the start of next week across the upper plains and then going back across the Rocky Mountains as that trough kind of makes its way to the east and we see the surface interact. And we see the surface lows developing along with that. Above average temperatures. I think they're actually expecting highs in the 90s around Kansas City, I think, as we go into this weekend. Let's actually do that. Let's take a look here really quickly let's go ahead and pull up. We'll take a look over at the National Weather Service. Again, the main area I forecast for is Minnesota and Wisconsin. So a little bit out of my forecast realm, but let's go ahead and take a look over at Kansas City. What are they expecting? 90 degrees for a high tomorrow. Whew. That is a hot one. It's 88 there right now. Let's take a look here. I'm curious as to what is Kansas City's average this time of the year. Let's go ahead and take a look over there. We'll see if we can't find what their average high is for the day today. Let's go ahead and just see if we can't pull that up for Kansas City. Let's see. For today, the average high is 74. Today got it to 92. So their average low is 52. Tonight, or this morning, they got down to 63 degrees. An average daytime temperature of 78 degrees puts them 15 degrees above average. So if you remember a couple of days ago when we were taking a look at, the CPC's forecast, the most likely upper levels. Again, we talked about how that map is not telling you how above average it's going to be. It's just the likelihood of above average temperatures where we see those higher values, those higher percentages. Again, we're talking about, for those of you who might not remember, we're talking about this map that we took a look at a couple days ago, back when it was, showing the above average temperatures at across the central part of the U.S. Again, doesn't have to be, typically where we see those higher likelihoods is where we're going to be seeing, more above average temperatures. It doesn't always mean that, but it's just one of those things that tends to be how that works out. So it's not going to be colder in the panhandle of Texas than it will be up in Minnesota as we go into next week, but their temperatures will probably be a little bit more below average as they have a slightly higher likelihood of that, at least in the forecast, over that 6 to 10 day stretch. They average it all out. I know it sounds like a lot, but hopefully that makes sense. You get the idea. So doesn't mean warm or cold, it just means above or below average. And again, where we typically see higher likelihoods of either or, typically translates to probably seeing way more above average temperatures in the sense, not, 2 degrees above average, but probably, in the order of 10 to 15 to even 20 degrees above average. It's just generally how that works out, higher confidence for higher things. But that's not exactly what this map means, but correlations. All right. So, wow, boy, 92 degrees there. And that's not even a record. Apparently the record is 96 degrees, and that was in 1953. This is Kansas City, by the way, folks, in case you're wondering, over at the airport. Let's take a look at St. Joseph, Missouri. I believe is just to the north, if I remember correctly. St. Joseph is just to the north. Today they hit 94. That ties the record. They hit 94 degrees today in St. Joseph, Missouri. 94 degrees, that ties the record of 94 set back in 2002. They were also about averaged 15 degrees above average for the day today. So certainly a hot day down across there. While we're at it, let's go ahead and flip over. Let's go ahead and see how Chicago did today. See how Chicago did earlier today. We'll take a look at O'Hare. Let's see how O'Hare did today. 77 degrees, their average high is 70, so only about 7 degrees above average. Let's take a look over at Valpo on the east side of Chicago. 75, average is 73. So, okay, so they weren't that above average today. Let's see if we can't take a look at one more weather office here. Let's think. Let's see how Memphis is doing. I believe. Do it right. I got it wrong. I can't remember what their abbreviation is. Memphis Weather Office. I can't remember their code. It's going to drive me nuts now. All right, but let's take a look here at the Memphis International Airport. They hit 92 today. Ugh. The record, though, for this day in Memphis is 98. Good Lord. Oh, what a hot place, huh? They only about 10 degrees above average for the day today. So let's take a look here at the latest. Let's take a look at the surface chart here and see if we can't make a little bit of sense as to why. And then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Yeah, it just looks like that's just where a lot of the southwesterly winds were for the day today. It looks to be, it was pretty breezy there today. Again, not as breezy. And it looks like the frontal boundary did not lift over probably until just a little bit ago. Let's back this up. Where was that frontal boundary? I see it was right over St. Louis. Here's St. Louis, and again, here's Kansas City right back up in here. So this is St. Louis. You can see this morning the frontal boundary was stalled out. as we made our way through the day today. That high pressure kind of backed off a little bit, allowed that frontal boundary to move to the north as a warm front, and it looks like it just now lifted over the St. Louis area. Look at that, though, 90s back into Iowa, and even upper 80s down across parts of southern Minnesota. Let's see if they're still at that right now, as a matter of fact. We'll go ahead and take a look at some of these surface observations that I have up here. It might be hard for you to see on your screen, but right now in out, let's see here, 88 degrees there in northern Iowa. Mason City, it's 85. Boy, and look at those winds coming straight in from the south there. So again, there's the warm front in a sense lifted its way up towards the north. Again, all that warmer air is just kind of really rushing its way in. How are they doing down in Omaha? Let's see here. It is 91 degrees. Is this over? No, that's I think over to the north. Let's see here. It's going to be Council Bluffs over in Iowa, 88 degrees. And let's take a look here. If we can't get the Omaha airport, is this? Yeah, there you go. Coma. Haha. No. Omaha Airport, KOMA. 93 degrees there. My goodness. Very few clouds. Look at that. Winds basically southerly, 21 miles an hour, sustained, gusting to 28. So it's a breezy one out there. So this is not a very dew point's about 55, so this is not a humid heat either. This is kind of a little bit on the dry side, not by much, but not seeing necessarily the highest dew points with these. Oh, there's some storms right there developing along that frontal boundary. Looks like it could be a little bit of a stormy night up around the Sioux City area. Pretty cool. All right, I think we've gone long enough, folks. I think I might have confused you all enough for one night, so we'll leave it at that. All right, there you go. One more time for those of you who like seeing it. Binary interaction between two tropical systems of weak intensity in the central Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, I think it's cool. All right, there you go. That's all I got for you guys tonight. Hope you all have a good weekend. Again, looks like the football games across the Pacific Northwest as we go through the weekend. It could be a little bit on the rainy side, so that's going to be pretty cool, and maybe a little bit on the cool side, at least relatively speaking, for this time of the year. Might still be a bit above average, though, places like Chicago. So, again, a little bit of that system there. Pretty cool. Now you know at least a little bit of where it's coming from. So, that is kind of that. Maybe we'll do a special weather chat tomorrow. Maybe do a quick tropical update. Who knows? But in the meantime, I hope you'll have a good rest of your evening. See you back here, guys, in just a little. Well, see you guys back here probably tomorrow evening. Take care, everyone.